Steve Moran here. Welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. I am with Adria Thompson. We're going to be talking about dementia and I guess a little bit talking about how you use tech to help make dementia better. And so I'm very, very excited about that. But let's get started with this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Welcome, Adria. Welcome to Tech Tuesday. Let's start with just a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, what you're passionate about.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Adria Thompson. I am a speech language pathologist and I'm a dementia care educator on social media. So I've been a speech therapist for 10 years, working in long-term care communities like memory care, assisted living, nursing homes, and I specialize in working with people with dementia. I also have a grandmother with dementia. So that's where my passion lies, is just to support people with dementia to live better quality of life and help caregivers facilitate that.
Okay, terrific. So let's start. I'd love to actually dig in a little deeper. What is it that sparked your interest in the field of dementia?
Yeah. So as a speech therapist, my very first job was in a nursing home. And in grad school, I learned a lot about how to assess, diagnose, and treat disorders of communication, cognition, and swallowing. So many of the referrals of people in the nursing home that needed my assistance had other things going on. Maybe they've had a stroke in the past or they're having difficulty swallowing. But the majority of my patients also had dementia. And I felt like I was not equipped to communicate with, to interact with, very much less serve individuals with dementia. So I started really just like diving into learning as much as I could through other like courses and certifications and things. And then it was probably about 5 years down the path of that, where I was really just had an interest in learning more about dementia, that my own grandmother started showing signs and was then diagnosed. So that just kind of lit the fire under me even more, because I saw on the family side of things how little you know, how little you're given, how little resources actually exist. And so it kind of just happened that way, but then it came really personal and it solidified why I wanted to kind of dive into this field even more.
So I'm for people who are regular readers, watchers of our content. I'm walking this journey right now, and it's a very personal journey. My 91-year-old stepfather has been living with us. About 3 weeks ago, he got COVID, which landed him in the hospital for a week. I got COVID too. When we discharged, we ultimately went to a memory care community. And I think most people would call me sort of an expert about, I don't know, not so much dementia, but about senior living. And it's been a terribly, terribly difficult journey. What are the things, how do you help? How would you help me help him? Talk to me a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So forward facing, what I do now with my company called Be Light Care is I create video content all about how to learn more about dementia and to care for someone with dementia. So as you know, Steve, if someone in your life is experiencing changes in their brain, and maybe they get a diagnosis of dementia, we are, at the neurology appointment or whatever, you're given that information, you're given pamphlets, you're being told to join a support group. But then you go home and you have to care for that person. You have to help them change their clothes and fix them food and take a shower and all those day-to-day things that many caregivers have no idea where to start. So, just very practical things like, how do you get someone to shower if they think they already have, but they haven't? How do you get them to drink more water because they've been dehydrated, but they don't want to? How do you get them to change their shirt when they think they've just put this one on? And so that's the kind of things that I tackle in the videos that I make, is just very practical tips as to why those things are happening, and then what do we do about it. And all of my videos are 90 seconds or less, so very short. I know family members, friends, caregivers do not have time to sit down and watch hours long trainings about this stuff, but maybe they have 30 seconds to watch a clip of mine to better understand why something's happening, and then have something to try when they walk away to make their situation better. So that's really what I do. I have over 400 videos at this point.
Wow. And so how are they free? Do I pay for them? How does this work?
Yeah, they're all completely free, and they're on social media. So Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, well, let's actually talk a little bit. I'm sorry, we're gonna let the world listen in, and you're gonna help me out with a little bit with my stepfather here. Okay. So the first thing that we struggle with a little bit is, and he's in senior living care. So fortunately, I'm not exactly having to do with things like the shower stuff, although he doesn't like doing showers, and so it's been a battle. How do I get him to work with the community to go do his shower thing?
Yeah. It's very common for any kind of hygiene tasks to not be preferred, because we have always, to give you a little background why this is such a struggle, I mean, as functioning adults, we have always done those hygiene things independently and privately.
Yep.
So it's a very vulnerable thing to have to take off your clothes, to do all these things, but also the tasks are complex. So if we think about showering, for example, not only it's a very multi-step process. There you have to turn on the water, but you have to turn on just the right way, because if you make it too hot or too cold, then it's a terrible experience. You have all these bottles in the shower, right? And each bottle serves a different purpose, is used on a different part of the body, and is used in a certain order, right? So once you get in the shower, there's an order in which things happen, right? You maybe wash your hair, you wash your body, and so all of these things are so difficult to keep track of. Add on top of that a lot of sensations: warmth, heat, wetness, slipperiness. Maybe people who are afraid to fall will have even more anxiety in that situation. So we have to take a second and understand how complex the things we do every day is. And then with that in mind, we have to consider how we get someone to be motivated enough to still want to do that task, right? And motivation is so individualized, with or without dementia, right? If someone wants me to run a mile, my motivation for doing that and your motivation might be different. If you tell me at the end of it, we get like a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts, I might be more motivated than if you told me after that, then we're going to go for a swim, right? So we have to know the person really well. And so for someone like you described, who doesn't want to go into these tasks, we have to consider, first of all, what's their objection? Whether it's true or not, we have to understand that. So an objection, for example, might be, well, I already have. Or an objection might be, it's too cold. Or an objection might be, I'm afraid I'm going to fall. We have to understand that objection is very real to them. And then we have to find out what motivates them enough to get over that objection to do it anyway. So I can give you a practical example of that.
Well, I'm just thinking about this for a minute, and I know that when we finally got him to shower, when the community got him to shower, first off, we started with sort of an agreement before dinner that he'd do it after dinner. Mm-hmm. And then we bribed him with ice cream and a milkshake. Yeah. And at least for me, here's part of the problem. So this is he's a gentleman who was highly, highly successful in business. And the idea that I could ever tempt him or bribe him to do anything with a milkshake from McDonald's, honestly, just feels all wrong to me. And so that's a big part of it. I guess maybe part of this is, how do we as family givers and as caregivers sort of get past those kinds of things?
Yeah, because it's not in line with what you know of him. It's not his, I worked with a man who was an architect in a memory care community during COVID, and he was He liked to dress really nice. He always had a button up and slacks and a belt and dress shoes. However, many of the times he would wear those same clothing items 5 days in a row. Like, he never wanted to change. Left to his own devices, he would wear them forever. And so to consider this man who's so intelligent, that's so put together, that does care about his appearance, be someone who is dirty, or to be someone who is silly, even like those personality changes. You're exactly right. That's one of the hardest things, because for someone like me who works in a care community, I can let go what the person was because I never knew them. Right? Like the fact that he's a businessman, that he was always so proper and put together, that's a story to me. But what I see in front of me is just Bob, who's a nice guy, like, here's a milkshake, right? But for families, they not only like know Bob to his core, but they've seen him through his whole life. And so it is much more difficult for families to kind of let go of who that person was and accept the new normal. I hate that phrase, but that's really what it is.
Yeah, I actually really like the idea that it is a new normal, because I think that's an accurate description. I have a good friend of mine, somebody I grew up with, who's caring for his mother who has dementia. He's actually had to move out of his own home and stay with her for economic reasons, and he's having to give her baths. And the idea of me ever having to bathe my mom and take care of bathrooms and functions, I feel grateful that he's in a community rather than that. So I've got one more that I'd like to talk to you about.
Okay.
So he has his cell phone with him still. And he gets very anxious about things like where his car is, where his checkbook is, his finances, all he's got. He'll way outlive his money. So they're not serious issues, but terrible anxiety. And so he calls me 15, 18 times a day. What do I do about that? I mean, I don't answer all of those because I wouldn't get anything done.
Yeah.
But how do I deal with that?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's two problems there. One is the repetitive phone calls, right? But the deeper issue is the anxiety surrounding his safety, his financial safety, his physical safety, his belongings and their safety. So we know that repetitive questions, repetitive storytelling, all comes from short-term memory loss. That's very common, especially with Alzheimer's type of dementia. And so when we see that happening, we have to, acknowledge this is a part of the disease. This is a symptom of a condition he has. This is not something that he's choosing to just, badger someone all day long. And I know you probably know that, but it's important to always kind of start there. Like, why is this happening? And so we know from evidence-based practice, especially as speech therapists, there are some tips and tricks. One of them being external memory aids. So those are basically signs. Anything you can put in there external to the person to help them remember something. And so what's been helpful for some people is to maybe have a whiteboard that's in a very salient part of the room, a part of the room that they always look at, that they can't not see, and to write information that is the most important. Most people with dementia can read well into the progression of their disease. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, people with dementia can read. Just because they're not reading long books or paragraphs, it doesn't mean that they can't just read information, right? And so putting up on the sign, like the phrases or sentences that would calm whatever anxiety. So we want to target the specific questions he's asking. Where's my money, right? And so we might know from trial and error that if we say your money is safe and in the bank and you have plenty of it, that calms him down for at least a second. However, if we say, well, your Uncle Bobby has your money and who knows what's going to happen to it, right? That's not going to be, that's not going to make him less stressed. So whether the truth or something other than the truth makes them feel calm, as families, we have to decide sometimes what's our goal. Is our goal making them know the truth all the time, or is our goal making them feel peace so they can live a peaceful life? That's whatever that is, that's going to be what we write. And typically when we write signs and reminders, we want it to be in the first person. So instead of your money is safe in your bank, it's my money is safe in my bank. So when they read it, they're like telling their own brain this information. So that's
Cool.
one.
I like that a lot. So I will tell you that. So I was, as we were talking about before we went live. My wife and I traveled to Seattle to see my new grandbaby,
Yeah.
which was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But it meant that I was not able to see my stepfather for 3 days while we were gone. And what's fascinating about it is that I told him that we were going to be gone. And virtually every time he'd call me in the 3 days I was gone, he'd want to know where I was and if I could come over. And we actually put on the whiteboard. So we do have a whiteboard up, and we put on the whiteboard that we were going to be gone to Seattle. It didn't seem to help at all. And in fact, it actually seemed to, even though he couldn't remember that we were gone, it actually seemed to up his anxiety level that we were gone. He seemed to have some awareness that we were gone, and that upped his anxiety level rather than reducing it. So it's very confusing.
No, that's a really great point, because some of things that work, obviously some things work for one person is not going to work for the other. But we have the example of, do we just tell the truth, or do we tell a piece of information that's going to make him feel peaceful? So, maybe, and it's all trial and error. Writing, Steve's in Seattle, that might make him feel like he is lonely, isolated, that he's in danger, right? Like the one person that he loves so much that's going to protect him and is always the one that answers all of his questions is really far away now. And so instead of Seattle, maybe next time it's like Steve's taking a break and is taking a nap, and during this time, whatever that is. And when it comes to repetitive phone calls, I also wanted to mention there are phone services and specific types of phones that will allow for quiet hours for caregivers. So you can record a message on the phone, like a voicemail essentially, that will play when the person either calls a certain number of times, like on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, time it does that, or during certain hours of the day, it'll play whatever message you record. And one company that does that is Raz Mobility. They have a memory phone that is really helpful for situations like that.
So one of the things that somebody, and this was a caregiver, it wasn't management at the company, so I want to be very careful about casting aspersions, but one of the caregivers said, well, the easiest solution is just to take his phone away. And I am not ready to do that, because I do know that would actually massively increase his anxiety. Yeah. It would make my life easier, but it would actually make his quality of life much, much worse. The other thing, I'd love to know if you have any experience with this. So I did a couple of calls with people who've built or are building, they're really in early stage companies that have AI companions for seniors. And I think in their mind, they see those as being companions for all seniors. And I'm a senior. It wouldn't work for me.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking for somebody with dementia, it might actually be a really good tool. So I've actually one of them has given me access to their tool, and I'm actually going to try I'm going to get it set up this week and see. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or experience with those kinds of tools.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. And yeah, I have some concerns. I think, in some capacity, someone with dementia could benefit in the fact, especially if it's targeting just isolation and loneliness, like if it's a social companion, having something to talk to could be helpful. But the biggest challenge that we see when it comes to technology for individuals with dementia, especially those who are probably, 70 years old or older, is that technology and any sort of screen things are not in their long-term memory, right? So when we think about short-term memory loss, what happens is it's the phrase, the last thing out or last thing in, first thing out is very relevant when it comes to technology. So the last thing, the latest things that a person has learned or has like become competent in will be the first thing that they forget. And so that's why a lot of times the very first signs of dementia could be someone saying, hey, my phone's broken, or my computer is broken, or my TV is broken, when the family member comes over and they're perfectly fine. The things are operating fine. It's just that the user has lost their ability to operate it. And so what we see is as someone progresses with dementia, especially those who are older, who only in the last 20 years has used smartphones or like had a TV that they can like manipulate and like move things around the screen, those things are going to be forgotten earlier. And so as someone progresses through dementia, they'll have less and less skills in using technology and interacting with it. So just anecdotally, like in a memory care community, we would have a big TV there, and sometimes it would have like trivia that would pop up, or, shows, or, the people with mild dementia would be able to look up and look at it, engage with it, and pay attention to it. But the individuals with more moderate and severe dementia, you try the whole like look up here, like turn their head, and it means nothing to them because it's just it doesn't, deep down in their brain, they're not used to attending to and engaging with a screen of any kind. So that's an issue sometimes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So he made his living, he made his wealth selling technology. But he is terribly technophobic. In fact, he called me this morning to tell me that in one of the calls I did pick up that he needs help with his cords, because he's got 2 cords in his room right now. He's got one for his laptop and one for his phone, and he's sure one of them is missing. I'm pretty sure they're not, but it's possible, but it's unlikely. And again, he's just losing it. So I'm jumping here a little bit, but the particular technology I'm looking at trying will actually initiate outbound calls to his cell phone. And I'm glad you said that about the screen, because the other one I talked to actually has a screen with a fairly realistic human AI generated avatar that to me sort of looks cooler. But now that it was, after listening to that, I'm thinking, yeah, probably the initiating a phone call to him to have a conversation actually could be super helpful. And again, it would just be social. So
with people with dementia, especially those with memory loss, familiarity is key. If it's not familiar, if they haven't engaged with it before, then it's likely not going to be super helpful. There's always going to be exceptions, but that's the general rule.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the things I guess I look at is I know he'll answer every call, including spam calls. Which I used to worry about more than I do, but I've realized that mostly even the things that people are asking him are too complex for him, and so I'm not as worried about that as I used to be. So when we look at the videos that you have, I guess the other part of it is that I've dealt with a ton of guilt, and so do you talk about that?
Yeah. So my specialty, like I said, is kind of focusing on the day-to-day care tasks about caring for someone with dementia. And although, yes, I address, the difficult decisions the caregivers have to make, and that guilt is going to be present whether you make the right or wrong decision, right? So guilt exists all the time. So it can't be an indicator of if the decision was a good one or not. However, there are other people on social media that do similar things to me who are have a background like in geropsychology, and they are like caregiver champions. There are when you are a caregiver, I encourage you to look on social media for content about dementia, because you'll find people like me who talk about the brass tacks of the day-to-day, the practical, how to care for someone kind of stuff. And you're going to find other people too who are there to support you, to help you work through those feelings of guilt and all the pressure and burnout that can happen as a caregiver. So although that's not my specialty, there absolutely are amazing people on social media that provide all the things that a caregiver might need.
So what are what else? Well, I'm going to do it differently. What else should I be asking you that I haven't?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me give you an example. I mentioned earlier about the gentleman who was an architect and didn't want to shower. I'll give you an example of what I did with him and how that turned into content, and how you'll find this on my page. So for this gentleman, I knew that his barrier was that he always thought he already had showered, which he showered every morning for his entire life. So it was in his brain, it was a correct assumption that if it's 3 o'clock, he's already showered. He doesn't need to right now. And so thinking about a person's motivation, I think about, okay, if it were true, if this man had showered already, what would be a situation in which he would shower again, right? So instead of just looking at a person and arguing with them and trying to convince them that they're wrong, say, okay, they're right. How do we do it again? And so I was inspired by my husband, who showers twice a day consistently, for one situation, which is when he gets his hair cut. Right, he'll shower in the morning, and then at a certain point in the day, he gets his hair cut, and then he always has to come home and shower because he hates the feeling of hair on his skin and on his neck. And so I took that piece of information and thought maybe that would work for this gentleman. And so, although yes, I'm a speech therapist, certainly not a hairdresser, this was COVID. We were all doing everything. No one was allowed in the building. And so we were cutting hair, we were doing it all. And so I sat this gentleman down in his bathroom in a chair, and I spoke to him with respect and professionalism, saying, this is my job. I came here to help you trim your hair. He was so appreciative of it. I trimmed his hair, but I specifically didn't put a towel or draped him at all. So at the end of it, I said, oh no, Bob, I'm so sorry. There's hair everywhere. What was I thinking? Oh my goodness. Here, let me turn on the shower real quick. You can jump in and rinse off. And you know what he did? He jumped in and rinsed off, when typically it would be a 3-hour fight of arguing about, yes, you need to, you have to, you haven't showered. So thinking about helping caregivers think through creative ways to get someone to do something that they need to do that's difficult. That's what I love. That's communication. And that's where my skills as a speech therapist can really help.
So there are two things I really like about that story. So first off, with my stepfather, his ex-wife passed away about 2 months ago. And it's been sort of an odd, he was married to my mom for 35 years. And so it's sort of odd that to watch him be much more, in many respects, more bereft about the death of his ex-wife, who he obviously didn't like enough to stay married to her. She didn't like him. It's a little fuzzy as to why they got divorced. And every time, and it was like every day, he would learn about it all fresh again. And we kept trying to figure out ways to keep him from being remembered. And we realized that telling him, oh yeah, well, she's died, is just cruelty.
Yeah.
And instead saying, oh man, yeah, I know you're concerned. We'll go check on her and see how she's doing, which you'll forget again. And it's just as a kinder case. And then a story that was gifted to many years ago that I really, really like, and is the same, very similar to the haircut case. Bob was a guy who was always very fastidious in a memory care community. And he decided he wasn't going to shower anymore. Mm-hmm. And of course, caregivers tried, I'll do it tomorrow. Wouldn't do it. Management came in and talked to him. No, I'm not going to shower. A family came in, not going to share it. Bob, if you don't do it, you're going to end up in skilled nursing. You're sick. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to shower. And this is more about the management of a building where people have the flexibility to help. There was actually a housekeeper in another department, but she'd somehow gotten to know Bob. And she learned that Bob used to love ballroom dancing. And in fact, he loved it so much that his best suit and his shoes with the shiny patent leather were still in the closet, and his necktie and everything. And she's hearing about Bob and she doesn't know what to do. And finally she gets this idea. And so she leaves her mop and her broom to the side, and she goes over to Bob, and she goes into Bob's room, and she says, "Bob, you want to go dancing with me?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I'd love to go dancing." "Bob, then if you're going to go dancing, we got to get you all cleaned up and showered. Can I give you a shower?" "Oh yeah, I can help you shower. I'll go shower." And so they went in, and she helped him bathe, and he got cleaned up. And then she took him out, and she got him dressed in his suit and his tie and these shiny leather shoes. And then she walked him out into the common area, and she put music on, and she started dancing with him. And I just love it when people can find those creative solutions like that. And I love it when senior living operators allow that kind of freedom so their team members can go do something to solve a real problem, because too often that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And the most important part of that story is that he did go dancing, right?
That's right. That's right.
Into, oh, we're going to go dancing. And then he gets showered, and then he's like, what the heck, right? Because that, even for someone who has memory loss, that can destroy their trust in people and the rapport that they have. And that's it. That's it. Is like when you're doing, there's a buzzword of like person-centered care, especially in long-term care, but and all of the medical community now. And that's what it looks like, is like knowing the person well and knowing like what motivates them and what gets them excited. I've printed off certificates that say you want an all-inclusive spa day that people will win at bingo, or that will draw their name out of a hat. And it's an exciting way to do a mundane task, but all of a sudden everyone is clapping and you are being whisked away to do, get a spa experience. It's making life magical for people who need it, to just do their daily things. And that's why I think my job is so fun. It's so creative. It brings me so much purpose here.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Great conversation. You gave me some great tips that I can use in my own circumstance. I love the fact that you've created these hundreds and hundreds of resources for people who are like me, who are trying to figure out how to do this better, how to create great life experiences for people who are losing their cognitive ability because of this, horrible disease that people are suffering with. So again, thank you very much. I will see you, the audience, next on Friday. We got another great guest talking also about memory care, interestingly. And so I hope that you have a great rest of your week. Again, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.